Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to everybody here. We've got a lot of people around this side that don't normally appear, so it's lovely to see you all here. Just welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Family Education and Justice Committee. Just remind you all that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely, and just remind all of us, not just on screen, to turn off our microphones when we're not speaking, and to turn them on when we are, which is probably more to the point. Okay, could we have apologies and substitutes, Liz?
Thank you, Convener. Apologies from Lloyd Melville, with Councillor Bill Duff substituting. Apologies from Louise Nichol, with no substitution. Apologies from Councillor Derek Wan, with Councillor Craig Fothering substituting. And apologies from Mrs Jackie Wilson and Christine Hay, Church representatives.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? Yes, Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Convener. I would like to declare an interest in item 7, review of fostering allowances. As members will be aware, I'm currently a kinship carer and won't take part in any debate or vote on that matter. I will leave the room.
It's okay, it's item 6 we're talking about. We have minutes of the previous meeting. Are these agreed? And the staffing sub, are they agreed? A few that are with there. Okay. We now have a motion, recognition of volunteers in Angus Area Support Team, and Councillor George Meehan has submitted this motion and will speak to it. I'll be seconding it. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. As part of children's hearing reform, the model of support to children's hearing is changing. This means a move away from area support teams who have been responsible for the coordination and delivery of children's hearings across the country and here in Angus. The area support teams have been staffed by volunteers in the local communities, and without these volunteers it would not have been possible to run such effective and efficient panels and to make decisions about children who are in need. The committee recognises the significant role our local volunteers have played in delivering this critical service. Some of these volunteers worked many hours and stepped up during COVID to ensure that services to vulnerable children continued. Volunteer roles will still be critical in the effective functioning of children's hearings, and we're all grateful for the continued commitment. For those roles that will come to an end at the end of February 2024, we are grateful for their service. I therefore ask the Family Education and Justice Committee on behalf of Angus Council to 1. Acknowledge the dedication of volunteers who have served on the area support teams covering Angus, those who will end their tenure soon, those who remain and those who have already left. We recognise their significant contribution to the operation of the children's hearings and decision making for vulnerable and young people. 2. We request that the Chief Executive to write to volunteers who will conclude their work at the end of February 2024 to express thanks for their service. And 3, request the Chief Executive to write to the volunteers who continue their service under the new model to thank them for their continued support. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Meehan. I'll second it, and basically I'm seconding for all the committee because I know that we all recognise the huge amount of work that has been put in over the many, many years by volunteers. I'm not sure that we can say thank you enough, but I think a letter from the Chief Executive is the least we can do. So that's it. Do we agree this? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, item number 5 is the Angus Advocacy Strategics Framework 23 to 26, and it's going to be introduced by John Cooper. And Rachel Bennison is here for questions if necessary. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, members. I have to say it's my absolute pleasure to bring the Joint Angus Advocacy Framework 2023 to 2026 to your committee today. The framework, as directed by the Mental Welfare Commission, really asks each local authority and health and social care partnership to have a joint plan outlining available advocacy services. And there is in fact further legislative duties in place to ensure that individuals with a mental illness, a personality disorder, a learning disability or children within education subject to tribunal proceedings, that they have access to independent advocacy services so their voices can be heard. The Angus Advocacy Planning Group has produced the framework before you today, so very much drawing from a multi-agency perspective, and the framework outlines all Commission services alongside the strategic priorities and actions for 2023 to 2026 in Angus. The format may seem long, it's a large document, but that has been designed following guidance from the Mental Welfare Commission, really to ensure that we have full compliance from their perspective. And it also includes, as you will see, significant consultation and engagement. Two separate consultation events were made to ensure a collaborative approach in creating this framework and the recommendations contained within this report. So myself and my colleague Rachel are happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Speed and then Councillor Proctor.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, firstly, I just want to kind of highlight just my awareness of the Angus Independent Advocacy and other organisations do in terms of kind of advocating on behalf of others within our community. What I wondered if Mr. Cooper could do is just explain where children and adults with a physical disability or children or adults with autism, where they fit within the strategy, because I couldn't see, you know, those cohorts anywhere within the report. I do know that there is a section that identifies a scope and exercise in determining unmet needs, but again, couldn't find those cohorts within that list either. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. So I would draw attention to page 6 within the framework, which really highlights, I suppose, what an independent advocacy service is and what it isn't. The purpose of independent advocacy is to ensure that those who have, it's not just about a particular communication barrier, it needs to be something that would be a barrier to them having their views expressed. So I think that can be understood in a broad sense. So I think there's not an exhaustive list contained within the framework in terms of those particular groups that you have highlighted. Obviously, the framework has gone through a lot of consultation with really efforts made to ensure that all groups are represented on this, but the purpose of the independent advocacy support is really to ensure that people's voices are heard, so we can't confuse it with potentially an interpretation service. It needs to be something for those who would lack capacity to advocate for themselves. So the particular groups that you've highlighted, if it was deemed through assessment that they were unable to advocate for themselves, my view would be that the framework would be very much appropriate for them. As I say, we don't have an exhaustive list of individuals who it could apply to, but I'm happy to pick up any conversations out with Councillor Speed should we need to clarify that further.
That okay, Councillor Speed?
Yeah, if we could perhaps pick up those conversations offline, that would be helpful, because as far as I'm aware, the groups that I mentioned, or the individuals within those groups that I mentioned, do often struggle or are refused from being supported by advocacy services. And I know your definition in terms of independent advocacy, and yeah, I fully understand the differences. But I believe that Angus Independent Advocacy, for example, do only receive funding to support particular groups, and perhaps there are others out with those groups who they don't receive funding for that absolutely require advocacy to help them navigate systems and processes and have their voice heard too, for whatever reason, because they can't do it themselves. So yeah, if we could perhaps pick that up offline, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, convener. Question I have is, at what age does a person cease to be a child and then, you know, transform on to being an adult? Because, you know, some of the people like Councillor Peake just spoke about, maybe people who are suffering from autism, for example, you know, there is a very, very difficult transition. So is there an age which is sort of we've actually got in mind where you cease to be a child and then you become an adult?
Thanks, Councillor Proctor. So the age of 18 would be classified as adult. Now, obviously, there will be occasions where individuals who are over 18 are still open and involved with Children and Family Service, depending on whether or not they'll be looked after a child. If there is a reason for social work to be involved due to disability or support, then obviously we look at transitional services moving into adult services beyond the age of 18. So really trying to avoid any, I suppose, what would be perceived as a cliff edge for support. So there's obviously, when you look through the framework, we have a number of different advocacy services that are covered within here, which includes, as Councillor Speed highlighted, Angus Independent Advocacy, as well as Parent to Parent, Angus Carer Centre and Who Cares. So it covers a broad range of ages, so there's no one that would fall out with the support contained within the framework. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I presume now that those who may be you know, being assisted, that their parents or guardians, whoever, they will be advised just exactly what you just said there just now.
Any more questions? Comments? Oh, is that a question? Okay. Put your microphone on.
Sorry about that. When I said about the review of allowances, item 7, I think you said it was item 6, but it's not, it's item 7. Yeah? Okay. Thank you.
Is this a comment? Yep. Okay. Councillor Braze.
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to thank officers for this report. I found it exceedingly easy to get drawn into it. You know, I'm like every other member, we're elected as lay people, and we don't have a great deal of specialist knowledge in every single area that the council's involved in. And this is maybe something that I don't have a great deal of knowledge in. But you made it very easy for me to gain that knowledge, just the way that it's all laid out. You know, you've got bullet points, and, well, they draw you in, and then nice, concise explanations of what's going on here, and much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd love to take credit for that, I really would, but I will certainly pass that congrats on to Rachel, so thank you, I appreciate those comments.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. My comment is really to thank particularly Eunice McLennan and Rachel Bennison for the enormous amount of work that has gone into this. We've seen it evolve, and it's just been worth it. And you'll hear that from the comments we've had today. And I just wondered if there was any possibility of an update coming to this committee, and whenever you deem appropriate, whether 6 months is too soon or a year. But I think the delivery of it is really important, and I think that committee members would find that useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Absolutely. Obviously contained within the framework on page 31, I think it is a delivery plan with a number of objectives set out. So I think it would be very much welcomed for us to come back and provide an update in due course. So happy to take that advice forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to say I appreciate the list of useful contacts at the end. I think that will be very useful for all of us here. So thanks for putting that in. Helpful. Okay, so no other comments. Recommendations are acknowledges the publication of the strategic framework and approves the priorities and actions outlined within the delivery plan. Do we agree? Thank you. Number 6, Tayside Bairns Hoose Pathfinder Programme. This is going to be introduced by Alan Hope. Thank you. I was just wondering if, as per Councillor Bell's point in the last bit there, if we could actually be saying that a report is brought, this is number 4, recommendation 4, that report is brought around 6 months as well to this committee. Would that be possible?
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yeah, 6 months' time would be appropriate to report back.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The report before you briefs members on the programme of work across Tayside to establish a Bairns House model of child protection. The Bairns House brings services for children affected by trauma together in one space that takes a child and their family through the whole process, from referral and investigation through to recovery. Ultimately, our aspiration is to provide a whole system response to children who have experienced abuse and trauma or have been a victim or witness to crime, and also for children under the age of criminal responsibility who have caused harm to others. So using well-established working relationships, a Tayside partnership, known as Team Tayside at the moment, but we're open to better suggestions, has formed with representation from the 3 local authorities, NHS Tayside and Police Scotland. Thus far, for the year 23-24, we've been awarded £286,000 to move on with the development of Bairns House. For this year, most of that is going to be on capital spend. When we come to next year's bidding, that's more likely to be on revenue, just because of the amount of time we had to get pull together the bid. So the planned outcome is summarised in the report. But at the moment, it looks like a project that will be worked to the end of this year and through 24-25. Well, there is a possibility that the government will consider extending for another year, but that's still very much a possibility at the moment.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is a fantastic programme. Effectively is creating a one-stop shop to bring all of the services to the child rather than the child going to all the other services individually. So I see from the report this is going to be based in Arbroath, but is there the potential that this one-stop shop can be sort of moved around the boroughs of Angus so that it's sort of a more movable thing to try and, again, stop the issue of the child then having to go to each service individually, and all the services will convene with the child wherever is the best place for them?
Thanks for that question, Councillor Gregg. That's very much the core of the bid, really, is to make sure services are delivered. Because it's a partnership with Dundee and Perthink and Ross in particular, both of us have got significant areas of rurality, and we want to make sure there's an equity of service right across quite hard to reach areas. We can't deliver every service in a locality, because sometimes a medical or forensic medical is required. But the majority of services we would be seeking to deliver where the child and family are comfortable. So that's the kind of equity we're looking for, is to spread right across. So although we'll have a building, if you like, in Arbroath, it's almost a kind of virtual response across the rest of Angus.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, and then Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Alan, and thanks to all the staff who've contributed to this. It's a really exciting development. I'm really pleased to see it. You actually covered off the funding question that I was going to ask, but I am also quite keen to hear how staff will be supported in terms of potential vicarious trauma. Thanks.
I think we already have existing arrangements in terms of support for staff who may be experiencing that. We've had counselling arrangements in place for some time for staff who require them. I'm not anticipating that this, other than perhaps having attended some of the regional meetings, will bring any additional trauma to what they already do, because we're not anticipating a difference in volume or a difference in the types of cases. These will still be the same families we're dealing with. What we're really aiming for is to help and support them in a much better way.
Councillor Speed.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Hope. I just wondered if you could just explain a little bit more about, I guess, what the differences will be in terms of this service. It highlights within the report, and as Councillor Gregg touched on, that there will be, improvements made to Bellevue House in Arbroath. However, it very clearly states that actually it's not just about providing a service in that location, but meeting the needs of the child and family. But what other differences can we see? And also, there's obviously the capital spend that you talked about and the initial monies that's been allocated. But what about kind of revenue costs? Are they likely to, what can you kind of put a bit of an estimate on what those figures will look like? And albeit there might be further opportunities to apply for revenue, bids for funding, what if those costs can't be met within existing budgets? What then? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. So in terms of the difference that we're looking for, you've obviously addressed the kind of physical changes to Bellevue House. I'll leave that aside. I assume that's kind of understood in making it a trauma-informed space. I think the other thing we're looking at is the support to families throughout the process. You're familiar with processes, you'll know how difficult the whole bit around child protection is. A child has to be quite brave to make a disclosure in the first place. There's then a whole mechanism around that, which can be very difficult for children and families. We're not always able to share the information we would like to. So what we're seeking to do is try and provide additional support for families, almost at point of referral, where they could go. At the moment, we're looking at being a third sector organisation to provide additional support, to actually almost hold their hand through the process. I think when our workers are dealing with child protection investigations, they have many priorities, and sometimes that kind of softer side gets a little bit lost in all that. So we're looking for that. So that's one part of it. The other parts we're looking at are fairly as enhanced health provisions. So we're seeking to recruit a couple of additional speech and language therapists, because we think communication difficulties are often present, sometimes for families, but sometimes for the children that we're trying to interview. So we need that bit as well. We're also seeking to employ another advanced nurse child protection practitioner, so that's always a hard one to get out, to kind of enhance the health bit of it as well. We think one of the bumpy bits around the process sometimes is arranging for forensic medicals, for example. They tend to take place either in Nine Wells or in Seymour House in Dundee. There are always logistic difficulties, moving families, getting them to the appointments and so on. So we're looking to kind of enhance the support that's around that in particular. So I guess those are the differences we're looking to make for families. In terms of the revenue bid, I think for next year the total available to us is £500,000. I think the majority of that is likely to go on revenue costs. So if we're looking for a service that supports families across Tayside, we're currently looking at probably about £250,000 for that. And the health staff will add on at least another 120,000 to that as well. So it soon takes up the bulk of that money that's available to us, assuming that we're going to get that. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions or comments? Well, I think that, as Councillor Gregg said early on, this is a great opportunity for us in Angus as well as in Tayside to help people in that very, very difficult process of child protection. So thank you very much for getting involved with all of this. Thank you. The recommendations are 4. Have due regard to the content of the report, 2 have due regard to the grant allocation, 3 endorse the Tayside Bairnshoes programme plan, and 4 direct that a report is brought to future Family Education Justice Committee probably within 6 months. Do we agree that? Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. We're on to number 7 now, and it's going to be Kirsty Lee introducing it. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you. So this report follows a report to Children and Learning in September last year, where committee agreed, subject to sufficient funding, to fully implement the national recommended allowances for foster and kinship carers. I think there was significant discussion at that committee. So we have since had confirmation that our funding allocation is close to £326,000 for the year. Implementing the allowance will see changes to our local allowances for children under 11 years old. We currently pay more than the recommended allowance for those over 11, and therefore would recommend no change. So therefore today we'd be recommending that we implement the national recommended allowance effective from the 1st of April 2023. In addition, we propose that applying the national allowance to the 4 additional weeks that we currently pay in Angus to our carers to meet additional costs for holidays and birthday times. The full year cost for implementation of this part of the proposal is under £30,000 and therefore well within the budget. And that part of the recommendation is on the allowances. Moving on to fees, we propose applying an uplift for the coming year 2024-25 of 3%. Again, there was a 6% uplift agreed last year, and we consider that 9% over 2 years is proportionate in terms of our fees. The recommendation is to implement and backdate the allowance and apply the 3% uplift to the fees. So we have members of our service here, Peter McDonnell and Lindsay Lane, who can answer any kind of more technical questions you might have, but the recommendations are in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Really value the role of foster carers, adopters and kinship carers. It's such an important part of how we support children. I just wanted to go back, and I absolutely support the proposed changes. Has an allowance been kept within the budget for the backdated amount, or is that presenting any challenges? Thanks.
Absolutely. So, we weren't sure what would come in terms of it. Apologies. I'll start again. We weren't sure what would come in terms of that amount. However, it is more than sufficient to meet the 3 areas that we are proposing here. So one is the full recommended uplift backdated, then it's the 4 weeks allowance and the uplift.
As bad as everybody else, sorry. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Convener, and awfully well done. And this is just something that's very dear to me, my experience and past career, and I think not only is this good practice, it's extremely necessary, because to keep bairns with their family is really vital, especially extended family who have maybe witnessed things going on and they know much better than anybody how that bairn's fared. So it is only right and just that we make sure that we, you'll never be able to cover everything, but it's just good practice, really. So, awfully well done.
Do you have a question, Councillor Whiteside? It's a comment. Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Convener. I just wanted to make my thanks noted to all our foster carers and kinship carers and adopters, and they just provide such a valuable service, but also thanks to the members of the staff who are constantly in search for enough foster carers and adopters. It's a difficult task. I know it's ongoing all the time, so well done to everybody involved.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, sorry. Oh, Councillor Speed and then Proctor.
Yeah, sorry, I had my hand up for a wee while and it was actually a question, if that's okay. I don't think you maybe...
Yes, it is actually, because Councillor Clark came in on comments. So, fine, you carry on with your question.
Thank you very much. It was really just a query around the difference between kind of babies, infants and young people and older people, and there is quite a difference there, and I appreciate that as the child gets bigger, often more costs are associated. However, it can often be quite expensive for wee ones too, with all the additional equipment and things that they need to help them to grow and to thrive successfully. But yeah, a wee explanation on that would be helpful. Thank you.
Again. Okay. Again. I'll defer to colleagues because you're absolutely right. It is quite difficult sometimes to understand exactly how we arrive at these rates, and but there are national groups that we're members of that spend quite a lot of time costing this out. So I'll ask Lindsay and/or Peter to provide a bit more detail. Councillor Speed.
Thank you.
I think Lindsay's a bit more immersed in this, particularly in terms of national conversations, so I'll defer to her.
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor Speed. The differences are worked out nationally at the moment, and before that we have worked them out. We take advice from the Fostering Network, and we don't pay quite as much as they're recommending a slightly higher rate, but the current recommended rates are, it's the Scottish Government that's come up with those rates and have done quite a bit of research into looking at it, and we've noted this time that they have the rate is the same for 5 to 15-year-olds, which I think has come as a surprise to some carers. But they assure us they've done quite a lot of work on that and will continue to do work. I'm not sure exactly of the mechanisms that they use to come up with that amount, but I know that there was a group that spent quite a lot of time looking at that, and they will continue to review these amounts yearly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Proctor.
Thanks very much, convener. I was actually going to ask the same question as Councillor Speed about the aid, but I do appreciate that experts have obviously got the answer. But I'd just like to thank all those who actually take on this vital work of fostering kinship carers and adopters. I mean, they provide a vital service, and I really don't think that they're in it for the money. I think they're in it to actually help these poor, unfortunate kids, give them a decent start in life. And for that, I think that we as a council should be eternally grateful, and whatever increase in funding we manage to give them, I think is something that we've got to do.
Thanks, Councillor Proctor. Did you want to say anything? No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that it's a huge commitment that people take on, and we really, really appreciate it. I suppose we would love to see more people doing that as well, so that children, young people can be kept nearer their home, instead of sometimes having to leave Angus, which is not what anybody wants to see. But thank you very much. Do we agree? Oh, sorry. Did you have your hand up? Councillor Bell? No, it was just your specs. Okay. Recommendations are 1, implement the revised allowances. 2, have due regard to the eligible carers receive the payment backdated to 1st of April 23. 3, approve 3% uplift of fees. And 4, have due regard to the respective costs can be met from the SRA funding. Do we agree? Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for attending and for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Stop recording now, John.